Second.
February and March. Right? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, service adjustments to Sandra.
I'm here, I'm getting ready.
Didn't we see this last one?
Well, yes and no.
Today it's
Today
an
is an
action
action.
item.
The purpose of today is to tell you a little bit about what we've heard from the public hearings so far,
Oh,
and let you know that there's another public hearing coming. So, as you have seen, and as an information item in the past, we have a number of routes that we have been discussing as lower performing routes, not necessarily poor performing, but lower performing routes that staff had recommended for elimination based on the budget that we currently have and our future projections of budget deficits. So as part of this, there would be a couple of routes eliminated, including the 22 and the 58, as well as several of the connectors, and then portions of routes that we would combine together in order to take the best pieces of those routes and continue to serve in those areas. So those would be a portion of the 16, a portion of the 38, a portion of the 5. So this was very important to our track committee to understand which portions of those routes would be kept and which areas would continue to see service. So the western portion of the 38 and the southern portion of the 16 would be put together so that their lower performing areas would be eliminated. In the same vein, we would take the eastern portion of the 5 from Grand Central into downtown and connect it with the Route 9. So if it is approved to make these eliminations, that is how those routes would be changed. If the recommendation is to wait for the eliminations, we would still recommend making this change and keep the western portion of the 5, at least for the time being. Also, as part of the cuts, would be a reduction in our DART service. So in these areas where you can see there are DART customers, but we are not required by the federal law to provide DART service in these areas. In the past, these areas have had fixed route service that required us to have a complimentary paratransit service, but those fixed route services no longer exist, and so our obligation to these areas is goodwill at this point. So we have had almost 300 comments from folks. We're still entering those into a database. So for the board meeting, we will have a list of dates, names, and how we got comments and what the summary of their comments are. All of the comments that we have received have asked us to keep the service. The highest commented route would be the Route 58. So we've received probably the largest number of comments on that particular route, in addition to some businesses in the Bryan-Dairy corridor asking us to keep that route. Although we have received comments on all of the routes for various reasons, people going to work, people going to school, people needing just general access to the things that they do for their life. So we really have two choices at this point. We originally set out on this journey to have this service change happen in June. The board's had a lot of discussion about how that happens, the need for the service in the community, as well as what our overall financial outlook looks like. So at this point, there is a choice, right? There is a choice to eliminate them or a choice not to. Usually staff comes with a singular recommendation, but I think this is worth a discussion of, do we go ahead and make these eliminations in June, knowing that we have the budget deficit, or do we create another plan that says, how long are we going to talk about new revenue before we pull the trigger on some of these cuts? Because the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be, because those cuts are going to have to be deeper. And so just as a place to start, a straw man recommendation is that if we do decide to defer, how long? We could be October. Can we find a way to get additional funding into our budget cycle before July, which would be the time that we would have to make the decision in order to have that technical work done and have that service change happen in October. So I know it's a squishy recommendation, but it's really for a discussion and an action item, because we have to take it at this point to know whether we're going to make these cuts in June or not, and then what's the action plan going forward. So I'll open it for.
And maybe you want to say what track did, which
Oh.
one of them they picked.
Yes.
Sure, I know what.
They picked B. Wait, let's figure this out.
Right.
I mean, I think the general consensus of the board was to not pull back any service. I mean, B, what would be, I mean, do we have ideas on how we're raising $5 million in the new annual operating fund? I mean, we've talked about several different ways, but do you have a recommendation on that?
Well, we have a number of options, and some things that are maybe short-term options and some things that might be longer-term options. Certainly, there has been the discussion of the gas tax at the county level. This would require additional work with the county and an understanding of how other transportation issues get solved countywide. It also requires a discussion with the cities. We've talked about STP funds. That is something that happens at the MPO level. It may not be something that we get right away, and it's probably not going to be $5 million annually. But we've asked the MPO several times over the last few years to include us in the priorities for bus replacements. Those priorities are now included. We need to make a stronger ask to the MPO for those things. So there's a whole list of things that we could do. It's more about having a broader conversation, because that conversation has to happen at the board level to understand how the board is going to advocate for other funding sources outside of the PSTA discussions.
Well, I think the board members that are county commission members are advocating. I think those board members that come from cities, if we want to talk about gas tax, we have to have the buy-in from the cities, because the normal split is.
Right. 60-40 or whatever.
Yeah, well, and if we left it at that split, there's nothing left over, because the county needs what we need for our transportation funds. So there has to be a different way of using that extra 5 cents. So the cities need to advocate with their staff about that. And as we've kind of done, and they're not going to like it.
No, I know.
But
that's not a short-term recommendation either.
Well,
I mean, they could go at it right away,
yeah.
but
I think we need to be talking to them about it.
yeah.
That this is a possibility, and this is one of the few things we can do quickly. I mean, we can pass the new gas tax. I'm not even sure we can pass it as a county commission until we have that interlocal agreement lined up. So, I mean, we could pass it at our next meeting, but you don't pass it and then figure out what to do with it. You pass it and then implement it.
I mean, you asked me a question.
Yeah.
What I believe PSTA thus far has recommended, but it, again, is not really, we can only live within what we can do, which is, right, we're pretty much at that with the ad valorem, right? We're capped. We presented and made 2 recommendations that I think the board understands. One is funds that can be used that are flexible, that can be used for operating and capital are better than just capital. and there's certain kinds of funds that can only be used for capital. And then number two is using more reserves is doable, it's just not a sustainable practice, right?
Right.
So,
And in the long term, none of it's sustainable that we've talked about so far.
Right.
What's sustainable is having more money.
right.
Not money that we can shift around.
And all of the options that are available to the county commission or to PSTA that we have explored, at best, keep us where we're at,
Right.
right? The Ford Pinellas is sort of leading, doing a lot of planning and activities on an expanded transit network and improving the transit network. But all of the options that the county has talked, at least to me, about so far, and we're having, myself and the county executive and Whit Planton are having now increased number of meetings. The bed tax, the non-member cities contributions, the gas tax, those are all challenging. They all have their own challenges. The gas tax isn't really growing, and it's got the city-county split. The bed tax, the bed tax
Bed tax
needs
has to be
the tourist,
approved
the
by the
hoteliers to
TO.
agree.
Yeah,
Right. Everything's gonna be challenging, everything.
Right.
So it's gonna take time, like you just said, I think. So what I would describe option B is allowing some time to occur to,
And press forward.
Right.
press forward, yeah.
All fronts, or at least talking about it.
Talk about all those fronts, yeah.
Right. Right. Well, and certainly that would be my suggestion. I think, doesn't hurt to set a deadline, but, we have to be, just among us, willing to, let's just set the deadline and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Because some things may take longer than that, but in the end would be great. Would be better than cutting the service and then finding we could have done that a month later, whichever
Right.
option we come up with. So if we say we need to know we need to have identified that source by July 19th for sure, or by July 19th.
Well, we put that in there because that's the
Well,
vote for the,
Right.
that's the requirement for the budget
right.
vote. But yeah.
Yep, I think that's fine. It at least advances the conversation,
It sets
whereas
a-
the other one doesn't. Just,
Right.
okay, we're done then. You're just gonna cut.
The $5 million number, can you share where that came from?
I can do that. In the short term, as we look at things, this year we have a $1.7 million deficit. Next year we have about a $3.3 million deficit. So between the 2 years, knowing things that take a little time, but that's $5 million. And then that $3.3 million deficit we had projected last year for 2020 continues to grow as expenses continue to grow. Your CPI grows, et cetera. So, we're looking at issues down the road without, as you know, we're trying to take actions on all fronts, internally as well.
So, this kind of mixes, in my mind, two different action items, because one is cutting specific routes, and then the second part of it is actually sustaining us so we don't have to cut other routes that aren't on the list right now.
Right.
And I don't know, that's not necessarily 100% clear, right? So it's not, we can either cut these routes, or we need 1.7 or 800,000 or whatever the number is for these routes. We need additional funds to keep from making further cuts. So I think that needs to be just a little bit clearer, just in the explanation that this is full sustainability for the next couple of years, and avoids other cuts.
Right. But in the long run, it's still not enough.
No, that's why I said for the next couple of years. That's
another,
what.
yeah.
But
That's
you know,
another whole
when the presentation that we're looking at is about cutting specific routes, and the solution is to protect those routes and then not cut other routes.
Right,
It
right.
now throws in another thing into the item that wasn't in the initial
Right. Okay.
plan.
Gotcha.
So, and, you know, I was at the one public hearing, and I'm sure no board member needed to know that, you know, when you're taking things away, there's real people
Sure.
behind,
Yeah.
you know, each of those cuts, and the services we provide are valuable to the community as a whole, to businesses and the overall function of the community. So, I definitely think, in line with what the board was saying, that option B makes a better route. I'm not sure, though, and I'm not saying it's not, I'm just not sure whether, you know, putting in the $5 million number makes sense. If that becomes a point of contention or a goal, right? You know, I don't know how other people are gonna see that. Is that helping us or hurting us in the argument? That's my only hang up.
I don't think it's either helping or hurting. I think it is. It's a
Informing.
number. I mean,
It's what it
you know,
is.
it kind of summarizes what, if we went out and made the other communities pay, it would equal maybe $5 million. If we got a different kind of split on the gas tax, it would mean $5 million, you know. So that would be great for 3 or 4 years, is that
Yeah.
what we said?
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, we gotta figure out, and now's the time to be looking at
Right.
how to really fund this and how transportation is important to our entire community and county, and
Yeah, for sure.
so,
So that, but like you said, that's a different question. This is a stopgap measure for a few
right,
years.
right.
And we have to keep saying that over and over again.
Yeah, because I don't want people to think it's a fix-all.
Yeah, and one of the pressures about trying to get the other communities to buy in, or to not buy in because they won't want to, is to pay up.
Pay in.
Is that we put that on the ballot, and then we try to put something bigger on the ballot, and we may be working against ourselves, but maybe not. You know, maybe that's just something, I'm more concerned about what's going on in the legislature with, you know, trying to limit when you can have referendums and what percentage of people have to. I mean, there's one in there that says 66% now, that's just about impossible. Until you can't drive anywhere in this county without, you know, getting stuck in traffic. So hopefully that part at least will die. I think maybe the part about only being able to hold such a referendum at a general election, which I'm not sure if that means just presidentials or does it mean gubernatorial elections too? Probably gubernatorial.
I don't know.
Probably either. But, so that, you know, that kind of defines when you're gonna put that on the ballot.
I heard,
Get that on.
and I'm looking at you, maybe you can confirm this, just to sort of try to give some hope to option B, is that the county commission is working on scheduling 1 or 2 different workshops on the issue.
Right.
One specifically I heard with the Tourist Development Council.
Yeah.
Kind of explore that directly with them, that option.
Yep.
And then maybe, I wasn't sure what this one, maybe just another one with the county commission
Yeah, I think,
itself.
yeah. Well, and yeah,
Kind of talk about these things.
Tourist development, of course, I've got people calling me up every week wanting something else funded by the tourist development funds, you know.
Yes.
So that, yeah, you do. And, let's see, the Dali, and
Dali and the
probably the
Phillies.
Holocaust Museum, and, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we haven't heard from the Rays yet. So, yeah, I think there's room there, but it's not gonna be a lot of money either, since we only get to control 40% minus 10% for beach renourishment, because that's already written into the statute. And we already have committed monies to things like baseball, spring training, and stuff like
Right.
that.
in addition,
So it's
limited
just-
to tourist-oriented transportation
Yeah.
and capital.
Although there's some question whether there's some operating, I don't know. but-
Yes, that is question, I question that too. But
Yeah, we're waiting for a definitive answer, which is probably come
Definitely
out in that
tourist-oriented.
transportation. Yeah, it has to be tourist oriented, but there's certainly things we do that are tourist
Yeah.
oriented that could be funded.
We had proposed improving the Jolly Trolley service and express service from the beach to the airport. Two very
Right there.
obvious.
So, yeah, that doesn't Necessarily help us with our basic system, but
Right.
maybe we can get something out of that. So I would recommend B, that we just keep working on it. And we put some time sensitivity to it. But I need a motion.
Well, I make a motion that we recommend Plan B.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Alrighty.
Can I add one comment on that?
Yes,
after-
please.
Not affecting the vote. One of the things, though, that I noticed out of the public hearings that I attended was, our riders and the public at large don't know how we spend our money, what we spend our money on, who contributes to different things. We heard several comments. Why don't you just charge, why is the looper free? Why don't you just charge $1 on the looper? Well, the looper's free because it's paid for by, the downtown partnership in the city of St. Petersburg.
Right.
So, and I would like to get those citizens who don't want these cuts on our side, seeking funds from other sources,
Right.
as opposed to telling us we're not doing things right within our own system.
Right.
Now, to be fair, if there are improvements we can make in our own system, I definitely want to hear those, but misconceptions or ideas that are not accurate about how things can actually work. I mean, there's a lot of talk of, well, why don't you just take the money from here? And we get that a
Right.
lot. Well, you
Right.
can't. So I'd like to see if there's some way just that we can help educate our riders who are our advocates using the system on what we're doing and why.
That might be just a marketing thing.
True.
The Looper is sponsored by,
Yeah.
St. Pete, or the same thing, the free ride at Clearwater is sponsored by City of Clearwater, that kind of
Right.
thing.
It was
Might
it was
need to put it
noteworthy.
on the side of the
It was
bus.
noteworthy hearing. I would say probably at least 2/3 of the speakers got up, and when some made comments, others
They're
clapped.
giving free rides.
That why are you doing this for them when you're not doing it for this? Or if you just did this, it would be that, well, you can't, you shouldn't. That's paid for by them. And if they knew, they'd be like, oh, well, that makes sense. But I'd rather have them on our side as opposed to fighting us on those things.
This is kind of out of left field, but have we ever thought about doing like a Citizens Academy for PSTA? Like having people go through
Or including us in the Pinellas County Citizens University, if we don't want to, as a module.
Yeah, because of course
Is
they're
that
not
a-
part of the county, but, I mean, they're not county government.
And of course, we have our Riders Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I'm just
that-
wondering though, that we found, both in the city and in the county, that the people that go through those things start to understand
Oh, yeah.
where your money comes from and where it goes, and how complicated it is to have a bus system, and they become fierce advocates for,
Yes.
when you
Well,
go out and ask for a referendum, they're the ones out there saying, yeah, we really need this because, PSTA can't raise their ad valorem tax, they can't, they need new buses, so you've got X number of people a year that go through it that tell their neighbors, and it just expands like that, and, I mean, in our case.
We're a regular stop on the Pinellas, Leadership Pinellas.
Yeah.
For that
but-
group.
But those are.
And
people-
like you say, once they hear Bob and the speech,
Right.
they get a tour of the facility, they're like, we had no idea. This
Right.
is,
Right.
and,
Well, that's
and
great.
they do become
I'm
supportive.
just saying,
Leadership St. Pete, we do
The
that with
whole
them.
operation, how do we do routing, how do we do finance, how do we, what's the deal with repairing these things, and how often do they have to be repaired, and who does it, and, just,
Yeah.
even like 5 or 6 weeks, and start recruiting people from the advisory committee, and know, they can tell their friends, because nobody hates those. Does St. Pete have one, do you think? Like a Citizens Academy thing?
Well, there's Leadership St. Pete, I'm not sure, I know there's like the police department has one.
Yeah, we got,
But
the
I don't know-
sheriff's
I don't think
office
that-
has one too.
Yeah, I don't think
I
the
mean,
city itself has one. At least I'm not aware.
Just talk to the marketing department and see, because it costs almost
This
nothing.
little thing, this is from the PSTA marketing department. Well, not exactly, but partially. And this is
Yeah.
somewhat related to what you're describing. An idea that we're launching in St. Pete, and hopefully maybe we can expand to other parts of the community too, where trying to identify folks that are interested, that are already doing stuff, that are already predisposed, riding public transit, riding their bike, not taking their car out for every single thing. Every time they put this hashtag Car-Free St. Pete, then we have them in our database. And then the Downtown Partnership is actually leading this, the St. Pete Downtown Partnership, and they had a social the other night that they brought all the people together. They invited all the people in the database so far to, it's doing kind of, it's not exactly the same as what you're describing, but it's kind of like a little mini version of that. And they are becoming much more astute. That was the group that Whitney got to go to the St. Pete Beach Commission meeting and speak sportively. You know, most of the almost all of the speakers were not from St. Pete Beach. They were folks that we know. They came from other cities.
Right.
So it wasn't so bad that all of the Car-Free St. Pete people, the positives were not from St. Pete Beach either, but I don't know.
So anyway, just to think,
Yeah.
if the marketing department would like to talk about it, just,
Is
you
it
know.
a whole year long thing?
No. I mean, it varies, depends on how much you have to say, but I could see filling up 5 or 6 weeks with,
Like one night a week.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you come in, you give them some food, and spend a couple of hours walking them through maintenance, or talk about DART and what, you know, what are the issues there, and who does that, and why does it cost so damn much money? Just all, you know, I think that the county marketing people would probably love to help with that. You know, put together some stuff, and it's staff people that are doing it. You know, talk about your job for 2 hours,
Yeah.
you know. And and why can't we just buy smaller buses? Or, I mean, take all the questions that you know people ask, and you have to answer at least 3 times a week, and put them in that presentation. Why don't you just?
Or you can have an FAQ on the website.
Yeah.
People ask
people-
questions and, you know, things like that, throw those in there. Okay.
But seriously, you get serious advocates out of that. Anyway. Central Avenue BRT funding plan. And moving on.
And moving on to more exciting.
Well, good morning.
Citizens
Advocate
Academy is
things.
exciting. Anyway.
Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management Office. Just wanted to give you a high level on where we are with the project. As you know, this is a project we're seeking federal funding on.
Right.
And FTA's funding requirements are multi-year, multi-step, and we got a medium-high rating recently, and so the momentum is definitely on our side. We're advancing on our design. We just completed 30%, working with all our stakeholders, all partners to advance the design. So, I mean, really where we are is where we need to be in the federal process, where
What about
we...
St. Pete Beach?
We are looking at federal funding partnerships. As you know, one of the things that FTA rates us on is what local funding have you secured and committed
Right.
from the funding. What we got the rating on was just a snapshot on where things were at that time.
Right.
Now as we start to work towards a grant agreement with FTA, which we're hoping to get by the end of this year, FTA is looking for secured funding
Right.
from our local partners. So we are working with City of St. Petersburg and Florida Department of Transportation. We have funding secured from PSTA's own capital reserves.
Hmm.
So by summer of this year, we do hope to have funding agreements secured with the two entities.
So is St. Pete Beach gonna be a problem? Or are they coming
So,
around, or what?
as Abhishek just mentioned, St. Pete Beach is not a funding partner.
Right.
And the issue that came up where the city of St. Pete Beach put on their April 9th, had a discussion about the bus rapid transit project and proposed a resolution at their end of March meeting without notifying us to oppose the bus rapid transit.
Mhm.
That was then deferred to a April 9th meeting for further consideration. We got word of the resolution opposing the project. Actually, I got a word of it from Mayor Kreisman from earlier in the day. Abhishek sent an email to the mayor of St. Pete Beach saying the resolution had a number of inaccuracies about the project. They deferred it March to April 9th. April 9th, Commissioner Long, the PSTA chair, came and gave a presentation about that and asked that they not approve a resolution of opposition and instead work with us to collaborate with us on the project. At the same time, they hired their brand new city manager, Mr. Alex Ray, started. April 9th was his first meeting. And he had two hot topics on his agenda for the first meeting with a crowded room.
Is he still there? Yeah.
He's still there. He's still there because Abhishek and I just met with, and Heather met with him yesterday. Again, the majority of I would say there's a majority of the St. Pete Beach Commission wants to work on a solution. Wants to see if we can come up with a acceptable project from their perspective and work with the city and work with the new city manager. So we started that process yesterday in talking again with the city manager. If you watch you can watch the video. The majority of the discussion by the St. Pete Beach Commissioner was about lack of concern or lack of respect by the PSTA, the PSTA board, the Pinellas County Commission, with their city, and lots of discussion and a lack of trust, at least by some of the St. Pete Beach commissioners in PSTA as an organization, based on some comments that were made by board members of PSTA that are no longer on the board years ago, and just a feeling that we're not listening to their issues. It's been exacerbated substantially by a big construction project over the last couple of years in the Paso Grill neighborhood of St. Pete Beach,
Right.
which is a residential area in the very southern end, and they've had the roads all torn up and the trolley buses, as well as other traffic and trucks and everything, have really gotten a lot of citizens upset about PSTA. Generally, they don't ride the bus. The workers ride the trolley down there, but the residents in those big homes do not. And that all kind of came out, but they want to see if they can come up with a solution. So that's what they tabled the resolution opposing it. And yesterday we had a really good, I think, a very, very, the best meeting with any city manager that we've had down there, in that he is taking on the role that PSTA has struggled to do, to eliminate the trolley service in Paso Grill and replace it with some kind of micro transit, or those are his words, down there. a golf cart or something, some smaller kind of vehicle that would go down into the pastoral neighborhood. And at least he talked about kind of taking that on as a city activity. And then what of course that needs, if the trolleys and the BRT go down and then there's some kind of shuttle in Paso Grill where they meet, we need a bus stop near the Don Cesar Hotel. We need a place where passengers can get off one vehicle and get on to go down to Paso Grill if they want to, or vice versa. And that has been a sticking point with the city for a long time. And I think Abhishek might not totally agree with me on this, but I think we made some good headway on that too. Really good headway, where the city manager is supportive of, he understands that, which is a great step. And you can't just have the people milling about in the middle of the road, waiting for the bus to come. And so I'm very hopeful. They want it in writing, that we're gonna do all this stuff. So we're working now on an amendment, and that will be an amendment that I'll also take to the PSTA board. So hopefully next month, because they even mentioned that they really do want to strike a better partnership with the PSTA board.
So the amendment being to stop the trolley at the Don, or what, or stop the BRT at the Don, or whatever, which is.
Well,
Is the BRT.
BRT would never go to Paso Grill, so
Right.
that, yes, I think that's a requirement. The use of 40-foot or smaller vehicles than we had been proposing on the BRT, while still keeping all the amenities that we want to do on the BRT, is definitely a big issue. The third issue is not an issue, but is one that they of course raised, which was the no changes to the lanes along Gulf Boulevard, which we weren't proposing, but we're going to put that in there in just a minute. So to lock it down for
I
them.
heard there was some misinformation on that whole thing.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. Oh, and then no funding, that they're not going to fund it. And that issue is sort of a trust issue because, as Abhishek said, originally it had been the plan that they would support the project. And so that's in the document that FTA has up on their website. And so we were in communication with FTA that they are not part of the funding plan dating back to last year, and in writing in February, well before the article in the paper went out, or that they had this thing on their agenda. But we can't seem to get FTA to remove it from their website. They've acknowledged it, that they know St. Pete Beaches isn't in there, but they still have it up there. Abhishek's going up to, and Debbie are going to FTA tomorrow, to Atlanta, to ask again. But that's sort of a thing.
That's an inflammatory thing.
Yeah, but I'm hopeful. We're going to go back to them in May, and I put this on the agenda just to kind of give you an update of where things are at, and it's like a real-time thing, so.
Great.
Yeah.
So, does the BRT replace the trolley once it comes in? You wouldn't have the trolley and the BRT running up and down the beach.
Well, we want to have some level of trolley service on the beach because the BRT only has 3 stops. 3 stops in St. Pete Beach, and the trolley has many more.
Right.
And the idea really is that the BRT is an express on top of a local. So if you want to
They would
get,
continue to pay for the
Yes.
trolley, though.
we're looking at ways in which we might reduce the amount of service overall, or just in St. Pete Beach on the trolley once the BRT is up and running. Not before then, but because the BRT will be very frequent. It'll just have fewer. It'll have the main high ridership locations, but intermediary stops, you still need some kind of service. There's been discussions about, well, can't you just eliminate, just turn the bus around and not even go there? I think we'll hear that from the PSTA board maybe next week. The issue, of course, is the ridership. Whether we can have a successful BRT project or not, I'm not sure. But the ridership that is generated by the employment and tourist activity on St. Pete Beach at all those hotels along Gulf Boulevard is substantial. And
they aren't
it makes
represented by St. Pete Beach Council?
and Whitland was at the St. Pete Beach Commission meeting, and I can't remember what he said, 60%?
40%.
40% of the
Workers in St.
40% of the workers in St. Pete Beach live in St. Petersburg. And only 18% of the workers in St. Pete Beach live in St. Pete Beach. So it's 82% live somewhere else. They import the workers.
It's so odd to me.
And
Why? Why?
That they don't support,
Oh.
that St. Pete Beach doesn't support public transit.
well,
Because,
their residents are, I mean,
Well, I know.
you know, Clearwater Beach, there's not a lot of the workers on Clearwater Beach either that live on Clearwater Beach. They're
Right.
I
but,
would imagine.
but it's all part of the city of Clearwater. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's-
Can we look at getting the TDC to pony up the 1.5 million? That you know, this is tourist development, tourist oriented travel.
Well,
I imagine
Yeah, I
the
mean,
hoteliers that are
central- yeah.
that are part of the TDC are interested in having their employees and their customers being able to travel
right, I'm sure they.
through the corridor more swiftly.
Um,
That would probably be the easiest one for them to get on board with.
yeah, probably, if we can get anything past them, yeah. 'Cause they're the old timers and the powerful ones on that board. So, yeah,
There is a representation on the TDC from the trade winds, right?
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So probably, I mean, but we have more time than July, right? To get that one done.
Yeah.
All right.
We're not gonna put anything in there in our grant application with the FTA.
Yeah, don't put anything about TDC, because we don't want to blow that one up either. But yeah, probably. And if we could actually squeeze out operating money out of there, which we don't know yet, then yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Something else to work
Includes
on.
more,
It's called jobs.
So I know this is not a
I
future
didn't- I
meeting
didn't-
subject, but can I explain these?
Certainly.
So we have been helping the downtown partnership with this car-free living concept. They have a funding source through the Florida Department of Transportation where their job is to specifically to create awareness about alternative transportation, ways to get to work, specifically commuter services. And so we've helped them brainstorm how they can do that better and then incorporate some of the things that we're doing, and that's exactly what they're supposed to be doing as part of the transportation management organization portion of their business. They are in charge of Car Free St. Pete, and it is a consortium of transportation providers. So it does include us, includes the Cross Bay Ferry, includes Coast Bike Share, as well as the city of St. Petersburg, the pedestrian and other ways to get around. And so while we've been helping them put things together, they are in charge of this project. They've been really active on social media, pulling in things from all of the partners, and so we have sort of been helping them do this, but it is their program. get the other partners on board and active as well. And they will be finishing up the Car Free St. Pete Challenge for the month of April. So you can post a photo of you riding your bicycle, taking the Central Avenue
Notice
trolley.
Vince on there just about every day.
Vince, board members are eligible because somehow Vince Cox has won
Vince Cox
twice.
is on there all the time.
Yeah, I wondered.
He has.
Doing a great job.
So,
Whereas
we've, I don't know if you know this, St. Pete Downtown Partnership hired a new person to do their social, and so she's been great. And she's been really promoting us and the other providers to people that, as Brad mentioned, are interested in this. They're already doing things, and now this program is giving them a place to talk to each other, and they're talking to us more and asking us, how do I get more involved? How do I help more? And so I think, and a couple of them were featured in the video that was done for Coffee St. Pete that I think that Brad sent out. So it's like a whole new group of people that we really haven't tapped into that are getting interested because they're interested in one of these things, and then they get interested in all of them.
All right. Well, do we have future meeting topics? Money.
Yes. Well, I think next month we'll start feeding you the budget for next year, which is also money.
Okay.
I think that'll be the main topic next month. I saw, yeah, and that's what's listed on here.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the?
Good. Okay. And we're done. Yeah.
You're gonna make yourself conscious.
I'm just thinking. Yeah, after the board meeting next week, is when we have our main air ride.